Peak week secrets. Do they even exist? How much carbs is too many carbs? How many diuretics will make your heart spasm? These are the things we're going to get into on today's Max's MuscleTV podcast. I am your host, Scott Goble, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Mr. Luke Schembri. Luke, I imagine
Scotty.
your peak week protocols have changed a little bit over the years. I know mine certainly have. I did some crazy things back in the day, but I think we have a little bit more of an understanding of how to go about it. And I'm sure our listeners would like a little bit of insight. Now, obviously there is no cookie cutter, one plan fits all style of approach, but I think there's a few things that we need to touch on, and maybe we kick it off with one of the basics. Just something as simple as tanning, which can really make or break you. I've seen some fantastic physiques on stage with some terrible tans be penalised as a result. So if we just start there, mate, what do you think? Are you a waxer? Are you a shaver? Have you got any hair removal disaster stories? Because I have one, actually.
Mate, I have two hair removal disaster stories that were absolutely terrible. One of them was Max's. I had to pose for Max's at one of the fitness expos, the Sydney Fitness Expo. I'd just been signed by Max's. I was so excited. It was in the middle of the off season, so I was really overweight. I had dieted down. It was like beautiful. I'm going to be posing on the Max's stand. It was great. Ended up getting a full body wax 2 days before the show, and unbeknownst to me, the pot of wax, it had some sort of like staph in there, and mate, I was literally, and I'm not going to try to exaggerate here, so I really am being serious. If I didn't have close to 1,000 whiteheads that appeared on my skin within 24 hours. It was crazy. I was so devastated, mate. I was almost in tears. I was like, my big dream. I've been sponsored by Max's. I'm going to pose on the Fitness Expo. And I was covered top to toe in whiteheads. It was terrible. And then it actually happened to me one other time as well. So I ditched the full body waxing. Interestingly, back in the day, nobody at all had any idea who I was. And the only people that were watching me pose were two 50-year-old women who were cheering very loudly at my posing. So it was kind of good because they didn't really mind about all of the whiteheads that I had. But, mate, staph infection twice on the skin, and it was absolutely devastating. Like 1,000 whiteheads is not an exaggeration.
Hey, my experience was exactly the same. It was the full body wax, and I swear every single hair follicle turned into a whitehead. It was an amazing phenomenon. Luckily for me, I had done it I think I'd done it on a Monday before a Saturday or Sunday show. So with some scrubbing and a liberal approach of, I think it was tea tree oil was recommended. I largely got on top of it by show day, but yeah, it put me off waxing for life, to be completely honest. I'd heard other people say, no, like it's just the type of wax, or it's just this, or it's just that. This will be fine. I understand what to do. And yeah, I was in the same boat. I was in absolute panic, 4 or 5 days out of the show thinking, what the hell am I going to do with this? They've completely ruined my chances of stepping on stage. It was for my first ever comp. So from that point on, I was a shaver or a nair guy on the back. I used to, because I really didn't want to get my mum to shave my back, and I was perpetually single by the time a contest rolled around, at least. Sometimes I'd start the prep with a girlfriend. But so I used to use a spatula with nair so I could reach the middle of my back, and then I would scrape it off with the spatula and jump in the shower. It was quite the scene. It's a very glamorous sport, bodybuilding, when you think about it.
I was, one time, mate, I was single in a prep too, and so the only option was my sister, who was 39 weeks pregnant, and it was a hot day, and she was shaving me from top to toe, mate, and she was literally 39 weeks, about to pop, and I was like, I just can't get this right. I'm going from staph infections to this. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about full body shaving.
Have you ever been in the position where you've been forced to shave another man's back?
No, I've got out of those ones. What about yourself?
Scotty Slayman got me with that one at the UBC up in Queensland. We shared a hotel room. I thought it was a good deal. Save a little bit of money, and then he busted it out at me the night before the show. Mate, I need some help with my back. I'm like, all right, I guess we're just gonna have to do this. So yeah, It happens. But look, I guess it is a serious topic. Like, I mean, you do have to remove all the body hair in the lead up to the show. And I think, if anything, our experience should let our listeners know that you probably want to give it a trial run first. And it's probably best not to do it at 2 or 3 days out, because things can go wrong. And there are some issues that can arise. Like, if you shave like the morning, like say you've got your first coat of tan going on Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening, and you're shaving Thursday morning, just to try and get the hair as light as possible come show day. Sometimes those follicles can be open, and sometimes that can wreak havoc on your skin. So as a general rule, you do want to get the hair off a little bit earlier. You want to use a tried and tested method, obviously. And then another little tip I would have is probably, in the lead up to the show, a little bit of skincare doesn't go astray. Not something I did early on, but towards the latter stages of my competition career, I learnt the value of a little bit of exfoliation and things of that nature. You don't want to have any sort of chemical cocktail going on the skin, so it's not like you want to, moisturize or anything right before a tan goes on, but you want to make sure that your skin's not dry and hanging off you at the same time. So that would be my main advice. Have you got anything else there, Luke, on that front?
Not on shaving. I think at the present moment, you can get some pretty good body hair clippers. I'm a fan of those now. They do a pretty good job. Body hair clipper leading into a razor blade, that seemed to work really well for me. Didn't get any irritation or anything like that. It was always either the waxing or just straight shaving that was a bit of an irritation. But the body hair clippers now do a great job, and then you can fly through with like a Gillette Mac 5 and makes it a lot easier.
And you will always, if you're a guy, cut yourself at the back of the knees, just so you know. It's just inevitable that there will be a bleed somewhere around the knee region.
The shins used to get me. I remember one time I was shaving with just a single blade razor, and I was shaving up the shin, and I was like, oh, what's all that white stuff coming off? And it was just all skin. And they were big strokes too. I'm doing like 10 centimetre strokes. I did 2 or 3 of them before I was like, oh, that's actually skin.
oh dear. All right. Look, when it comes to tanning, you can do a home job. Don't recommend it as a general rule. Like these days, they're pretty good with it, and most of the federations will have a spray tan company or something that they recommend. I would always go with them, and that might be a slightly more expensive option, but as a general rule of thumb, you have the knowledge that you will be safe. Like if something goes wrong on the day, they will be there, and it will be their responsibility to fix you up. And if they don't, that reflects very badly on them as well as on you. So when it comes to IFBB, I always encourage people to go with Pro-Tan. When it comes to FMG, I would always encourage to go with their affiliated tanning group, as I would with any sort of federation. I know ICN has a number of tanners that are allowed backstage and do the job there. So that would be my advice, especially if it's your first show. Just go with the tried and tested people that will be on the day of the show. You might have a friend that works in a salon or something like that that's happy to put a tan through their spray gun and put it on you, but I've seen that done so many times, and more often than not, the first time competitor will come back too pale rather than too dark. You have to get ridiculously dark, like embarrassingly dark, like you're almost being accused of, doing a blackface routine and some sort of racial vilification. That's how dark you have to get. You want to be embarrassed to go out in public, and if it's anything less than that, it is not suitable for the stage. So yeah, lather up and expect to look absolutely ridiculous, and if you're attending work the day before your show, you're going to be questioned about it.
It has to be. I consider it, Scotty, to be the best money that you will invest the whole contest prep. That's my opinion, because if you leave it to the last minute to fix your tan, it's beyond stressful. It can completely ruin your look. It can add so much stress, so much anxiety. There's no better money you're going to spend than getting a professional tan for the comp. They do everything. They generally are allowed backstage. They top you up backstage. All you got to do is make your appointment. That's it. They look after everything. They help you backstage. And it's always funny, the old backstage tanning. I remember I was in Palm Springs doing a pro show over in the US, and mate, they had this big bucket of rainbow socks, and they were big socks. They were massive. I was like, oh, far out. They want you to put those on so your feet don't get spray tan. I can tell you the rainbow socks weren't made for feet, and they were almost like footy socks. So there you go. There's some, it was interesting.
Who informed you that you'd put it on the wrong area, Luke?
The lady who was pissing herself laughing as I walked into the spray tan booth with both rainbow socks on my feet.
Oh dear, that's a wonderful story. Yeah, look, it's not really a time for the modesty or even dignity at that point, but honestly, no one cares. Like at that point, you can be as a collection of naked people backstage, male and female, and honestly, it's the least sexual environment ever. You probably have a ridiculously hot naked girl talking to a ridiculously hot naked guy about what food they're going to eat post show. So it's a very, very weird environment backstage. But yeah, it's all just bodies. All right, so we've got our tan on. Well, maybe we haven't got our tan on. We're starting our peak week. What are your prime considerations for your athletes coming into peak week, Luke?
I guess it's how they're looking 7 days out. So that's the number one consideration that will drive everything. If somebody is still not quite in 100% shape 7 days out, it might be best just to push for a few more days just to get a tiny bit leaner. Not much is going to happen. And maybe plan on just having a bit of a short, sharp carb load at the end. The other consideration is someone who looks like Skeletor, bone dry, skin's peeled. It's two completely different worlds there. Would you agree, Scotty? It really comes down to what you're looking like a week out. And I think a lot of people, aim to come in a week before, but they don't realize how difficult that actually is. Like if you're looking really sharp a week out, you've had an amazing prep. You've done it well. And it's very, very hard to do that because you're constantly thinking about the show day. Oh, I've got an extra 7 days. But realistically, when you hit the 7 days out from the show, the one consideration is how do I fill out my muscle glycogen stores and really back off the training? It's not ideal if you have to keep pushing, but there are certainly some situations that will warrant that because you certainly don't want to do a big carb load if you've still got a little bit of condition to go. So it definitely comes down to the look 7 days out. That dictates everything.
Absolutely agree. Look, I mean, if you are still losing body fat in your peak week, things haven't gone perfectly, but you're absolutely right. You've got to do what you need to do in order to look your best on the day. So in some instances, my clients will still have high output and very low calories at the start of their peak week, but ideally they're already backing off. Like the goal of a peak week is to, in my opinion, prevent water retention, not eliminate water. It's more to prevent water retention and to fill up the muscle with glycogen. And that's about it. And it sounds strange, but a fair bit goes into that. For example, the prevention of water retention would typically mean a reduction of stress and a reduction of inflammation. So that means a reduction of training volume, training intensity, and a reduction of output as well. Like if you're smashing an hour of stairs, there's going to be a little bit of lower body inflammation that comes with that, and then you're just going to hope that you can allow that to dissipate within the last couple of days before the show. So a best case scenario is that you don't have body fat to lose, and you can cruise through your peak week with light, easy workouts, no cardio, moderate output, literally 8,000 steps a day or something like that, just for the sake of circulation and digestion. And if you can do that, then you're in a pretty good spot. Now, when it comes to carb loading itself, it seems to be quite an individual thing in my experience, Lee. Do you have some rough parameters or guidelines you might run with a first-time competitor? Maybe you haven't had the opportunity to experiment with their body. You're not exactly sure how they're going to respond. What's a good place to start, I guess?
So I guess just to qualify, we're talking about a start of the week carb load that might taper down. Is that what we're... Because I know you and I, Scotty, back in the day, we did things very differently, and we'd do a really aggressive 72-hour carb load just before the show. So just one thing, Scotty. We didn't look too bad, and we did nail it a few times. Do you think the biggest risk with that is from digestion, that, if I'm going to carb load 72 hours before, I might have some bloating, but also I can't really modify the carb load because I won't see the effects of the carb load for another 72 hours. So I'm literally leaving it to the last minute. Would you say that it's more that there's greater risks doing a 3-day carb load directly before the show, whereas earlier in the week you have a bit more ability to modify things based on how the athlete's looking?
Absolutely. Assuming the body fat is gone, you should be able to carb up earlier in the week, and then you've got the luxury of time to make adjustments. If you put in 500 grams of carbs, very arbitrary number, and you don't fill out, you can adjust it. And likewise, if you go too far and you put on 2.5 kilos in day one and you start to soften out, you can pull back. Whereas if you're doing those things closer to the show, you've got very little time to adjust. and as a result, it's just less of an opportunity to get it right. So ideally, the carbs go in a little bit earlier these days. I do still have some clients which will load a little bit closer to the show, but I think a best case scenario is that, the carbs go in earlier and you get to taper back, mostly for the sake of digestion and the waistline. Assuming you're not doing anything crazy, you shouldn't flatten out that fast. So you should be able to hold your fullness because your output's going to be relatively low towards the end of the week. I think if we go with let's say we're starting our carb load on a Monday for a Saturday show, where do we begin?
Yeah, so if someone's absolutely nailed their condition, I'm happy to push it up to 8 to 10 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight per day. If they're in like decent condition, but maybe that amount of carbs might risk a bit of fluid retention, maybe knocking it down to 6 to 7 grams of carbs per day for the first few days of the week, and then just make an assessment from there. Maybe you carry that strategy on for day 4 and even day 5 and just taper off day 6. If someone fills out quite quickly, then maybe tapering off a bit earlier is a good option as well. So I guess the main consideration is just taking it day by day. But after about 2 to 3 days, you want to start to see the change in the physique. Maybe, that fluid dynamics, the fluid's redistributed a bit. It's pulled into the muscle. You notice an increase in fullness. Maybe there's an increase in vascularity. They're all really, really good signs. And I guess if you're doing an early carb load, the idea would be to maybe even spill a little bit before you start to taper back the carbs, because it just lets you know you've hit that point where the muscle glycogen stores are essentially saturated. Remembering if you've been in a calorie deficit for many weeks and you're training with resistance training, your body is going to want to pull in that muscle glycogen, and for limited periods of time, it'll super compensate, and you'll actually store more muscle glycogen than what you could normally store in the short term because of the fact that you've been so depleted. So it is, it's nice to have some numbers like that out there, maybe 6 to 7 grams per kilo of body weight if someone is looking good, but not maybe as sharp as they could be, and up to even 10 grams if someone is looking like Skeletor and their skin's transparent. They've got plenty of room to move.
Yeah, I think you touched on a good point there. The depletion phase, I sometimes get asked, do we deplete before we carb load? And my general response is you're already depleted. So there is no need. And all the studies done on carb loading that I'm aware of are done on marathon runners. And marathon runners are typically pounding carbohydrates. So in order for them to supercompensate, they do have to deplete first. But I think under the context of bodybuilding, you've been in a calorie deficit for so long, it's just inevitable that you're going to be depleted, and it's almost never a requirement to deplete prior to your carb load, because you should be already flat, and like you said, you should be looking like Skeletor. So there's absolutely no need to increase your insulin sensitivity when it's already through the roof. I've currently got Christian Caldwell loading for pro shows overseas, and he is doing exactly what you said. I think he's about 7 to 8 grams of carbs. And so far, it looks like he's going to run 7 to 8 grams of carbs per kilo, So in Christian's case, that's around 800 grams of carbs a day. And he is looking like he's going to run that for 5 straight days leading into the show, just because he was that depleted, and he's just putting on half a kilo a day, and he's just getting fuller and harder and tighter and drier in the process. That's what a good carb up does. It doesn't generally sacrifice conditioning for size. A good carb up will almost amplify your conditioning because you're drawing water into the muscle, and a bigger, fuller muscle is going to have greater separation and detail between adjacent muscle groups. So if all goes to plan, there won't be any significant regression in conditioning. But like you say, if you carb up nice and early, you can take it to the point where you start to soften out a little bit and then pull back and get on stage at maximum muscle volume and still be able to display that conditioning level. Water intake. I used to do some crazy stuff here, Luke. I remember, it was like the start of the week was 12 litres, and then it was 10 litres, then 8 litres, 6 litres, 4 litres, 2 litres into a show. I did shows where I probably didn't drink for 36 hours before the show. I did all sorts of crazy stuff. I am much, much more moderate with my water recommendations these days. I am just a guy who's like, what do you normally drink? All right, we're going to increase that by half a litre to a litre, and that's all we're doing. I'm not sure if you've got a different stance, but the idea being preventing water retention. One of the means in which you prevent water retention is by always staying hydrated. So my goal is to just keep you consistently hydrated all the way through the show. all the way through the peak week, excuse me, and then maybe restrict water depending on the athlete the night before, the day of. You have a different stance on this?
No, that's pretty much exactly what I do as well, Scotty. One thing you mentioned there is stress, and stress and elevated cortisol, and it can even affect your insulin sensitivity in the short term, and that can be problematic when you're carbing up. So believe it or not, Scotty, you might even know this, but I have meditated for 20 minutes in the morning for 90% of the mornings for the past 3.5 years. And it has been unbelievable. It has completely changed my brain and how it works. And if I have an athlete who is a bit more prone to stress, I will make sure that peak week, and even before that, leading into it, there is some breath work. Because if you do deep, deliberate breaths out, it engages the vagus nerve, that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reduces cortisol, reduces stress, reduces your heart rate, and it works really, really, really well. So just be mindful of the last week. Be mindful that you're going to be a bit anxious, you're going to be a bit stressed, you're going to be looking for every little modification you can make to get that last little bit out. And that really overcritical approach can also backfire on you to some degree, because if you start to hold fluid, it can be problematic. It can affect with the carb load. And so that you're talking about fluid retention. That is something that I've introduced over the past couple of years for people that have a tendency to be a bit more stressed, and that is some breath work in the final week. And in terms of the fluid, exactly what you do, Scotty. I keep it the same pretty much all the way through, and we might back it off the morning of the show depending on how they're looking.
Yeah, and another sort of gauge I use to determine whether the fluids are going to be restricted on the day of the show is just how do you look in the days leading up to the show? Do you wake up looking nice and dry and spectacular in the morning, and then by the night time, the lower body's maybe softened out a little bit, some of the finer lines have disappeared? It's probably, it's definitely going to be water retention related. You're not putting on body fat over the course of the day, and that might be an indicator that you should be restricting fluids on the day. Whereas I've got some clients who will wake up in the morning and they're sort of looking a little bit flat and not at their best, and as they drink, their body comes to life, and those clients will be pounding water on the day. And I think that's a great position to be in. There's nothing better than seeing your fellow competitors backstage dry in the mouth and desperate for a drink of water, and you're just chugging away. It makes you feel like you've got a little special advantage. So
what do you look for, Scotty? What do you look for if in your athlete if they need more water on the day of the show? Like, what are you looking for?
It depends on the athlete. Like, if we're talking big bodybuilders, it's quite often a vascularity thing. Like, if all their veins have completely disappeared, and that could just be anxiousness again, but typically that's it. A flat look with a lack of vascularity, to me, might suggest that it's time to put some water back in. Yeah.
Yep. No, I agree.
Sodium is something that, again, I used to manipulate like crazy. I had quite a few bad sodium experiences, or looks that went backwards due to sodium restriction. Nowadays, I think we understand the value of sodium and its role in fluid balance and glycogen formation, uptake, and the binding of the fluid to the glycogen and the capacity to fill out the muscle. So sodium is a fairly critical element in a peak week. And again, my whole stance on peak week is change as few variables as possible. So water, we might increase a tiny bit. Sodium, we're probably going to keep it the same. If you've got enough water coming in, it will generally allow your body to regulate and control and eliminate any excess sodium. And we probably need that remainder in order to keep those muscles full. So I'm generally, if all is going well, don't touch sodium in peak week guy. Are you the same, Luke, or you don't have any old school philosophies there?
Mate, my old school philosophy was I just don't know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to touch it. And I've pretty much just carried that through because it seems so problematic. You cut sodium too soon, you're going to hold fluid. You take in extra sodium, you might hold fluid. So just doing what you've done. Again, if you're looking like Skeletor 7 days out, all you're looking to do is just fill out those muscle glycogen stores. So you're already looking amazing doing what you're doing with the sodium. Don't change it at all. No changes last week. Same sort of deal. I've heard some horror stories about people manipulating sodium and it hasn't gone very well for them. So my approach has always been the same. I just didn't know enough about sodium initially, and I thought I'm not going to touch it, and I've carried that through, and it seems like that is the best overall approach.
That's smart. I did a show where I carb loaded on, I think, distilled water. I think I used freshwater fish to eliminate all sodium. And I've never spilled faster. It was quite amazing. That was the most disastrous carb load ever. And then post-show, I had, you know, a pizza or something super salty. Woke up the next day looking absolutely spectacular. It wasn't anything magical about, you know, the fats or anything like that. It was just that my body needed sodium in order to know what to do with all that fluid. And from that point on, I understood the value of sodium and I never took it out again. So, yeah, I think sodium's super important. And if you're going to get a pump on show day, I generally want to be putting in, you know, sodium prior to the pump up, an hour or so before. I like to get in a decent hit of sodium. And that, in the acute response to a hit of sodium, is probably an increase in blood volume because your body wants to regulate it. So you don't want to go too early with it, but you do need to get some sodium in there. In terms of training, Luke, I would assume you're, you know, the same as most of us, just pull back on the intensity, more just about getting a little bit of a pump than causing any muscle damage.
Yeah, for the start of the week, I always like to just say to the athletes, it's a full body workout. I give them a bit of a schedule where it might be, you know, one set of leg press into some push-ups, into a lat pull down, into, you know, a hamstring, and you're just literally going around the gym in a circuit style, and it's 20 to 30 minutes, and we aim for high repetition in reserve targets. So maybe you're aiming for, you know, 6 or 7 reps in reserve, like you're not pushing anywhere near failure. Maybe on top of that as well, you're using a slightly lighter weight. And all you're doing is, this is my opinion, Scotty, I might be correct here, but it's more just to keep the athlete happy from a psychological point of view, because it can be difficult to say, stop training 7 days out. They can start to stress. We just spoke about how, you know, the impacts of stress it can have on the final week. So I do give those 3 sessions, normally the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, half an hour max. You'd rate it at about a 4 out of 10 session. And it's more just to keep the athlete feeling like they're doing something, because the change going from maybe, you know, resistance training, cardio, posing to doing nothing, that's a very, very big change when someone has been razor sharp focused on, you know, getting all the work done, aiming for the bodybuilding show. Now my coach is saying, stop training and eat all of this food. It can really cause a lot of stress and anxiety in the short term.
Yeah, I agree. Look, the last thing you want to be doing is training super hard in the peak week. All you're going to do is induce muscle damage, and that's going to cause a little bit of inflammation. And with inflammation generally comes fluid retention. Like most people know, if you've absolutely obliterated your legs, typically the next day they're not quite as deeply defined. So very, very light, fluffy workouts for my clients as well. And I do agree, it's probably more important psychologically than it is physiologically. But just doing something, it just feels right as a competitor. So I always encourage them to train, and I don't think there's any real downside to it unless they go too hard. And I think we've already touched on output. Output for me is literally just, you know, baseline level of steps, relatively low steps, and I like to break them up throughout the day. Just so a little bit of circulation, a little bit of blood flow, you know, gentle movement helps with peristalsis, the contraction of the GI tract, just to move the food through it. In terms of carb selection and food volume, I tell my clients when they're carbing up, I like them to be hungry. I don't want them to be full. If they have high carb days throughout the process, I'm happy to load them up in low carb potatoes and let them enjoy the temporary sensation of fullness. But when come peak week, I want that food to digest so easily that their waist stays completely flat and empty the entire time. And I think it's a good sign if you're ravenous hungry as you carb up. Maybe not the best feeling, but normally from the standpoint of keeping the waist tight, that's the way to go. Do you have any carb up tricks? Were you a Vitago paste kind of guy back in the day?
I was, mate. I was doing it the old school, Milos Sarkev, Luke Woodway, 3 days, 1,000 grams of carbs, primarily liquid carbs, doing all that I could to shuttle those carbs in the muscle. Look, it worked, but it's risky because there's just no fallback if you spill over. And I guess if you spill over, the tendency is to look for extreme options and diuretics and things like that. So it just adds that element of, let's say, uncertainty. Sure, you can nail it, and I did nail it a few times, and I know you did as well, Scotty, but it's a bit more risk-prone overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to diuretics, I'm sure you're the same as me. When I started out, I was under the impression that diuretics were mandatory. If you wanted to be in dynamite condition, if you wanted to be dry, you had to take diuretics. And I did for the majority of my competitive career. But the dosage reduced throughout. And now that I'm prepping people, the dosage is reducing and reducing, and it's almost non-existent these days. It's kind of diuretics are there if something goes wrong. But if everything goes right, and by that I mean you give your body no reason to hold fluid. And if you think about it, the main reasons your body's holding fluid, like edema is not a state of good health. Like you shouldn't be holding water under the skin. And it normally comes about due to inflammation, electrolyte imbalance, dehydration, overcarbing, all of these
People
things.
Thinking that they're lean enough, but they're not. They've got too much body fat still.
Yes, absolutely. So if you can eliminate all those causes for fluid retention under the skin, then you don't really need to dry it any further, because the water reservoirs are largely within the muscle, and you take a diuretic, it's pulling the water from the muscle. There's a hierarchy of importance when it comes to fluid within the body. Under the skin's probably the least important. It'll probably go there first, but then it'll go from the muscles, because it's not going to go from the vital organs in the bloodstream. We need that water there. So you can flatten out damn fast if you take a diuretic to get rid of water, which just turned out to be lower back body fat, which I've done in the past. And it will just make you look worse, not better. So when it comes to diuretics, I would say tread very carefully and try and avoid them at all costs.
Scotty, I learned the hard way competing against you at the Country Classic. I knew I was a little bit behind. I had this plan in my head. It was just diuretics were going to sharpen me up. And I remember I got a pump backstage for about 2 minutes, and that was it. I just flattened completely. And I remember watching you backstage just getting harder and harder and harder. I was like, all right, I've stuffed this one up. But yeah, it was a disaster, man. I was so disappointed. Honestly, I was like, you're such an idiot, Luke. You should have just been leaner and not trying to do this crazy stuff last minute that just even made me look 10 times worse. So I certainly learned the hard way with diuretics. And, one of our good mates, Nick, who we might get on the show one day, researcher in medicinal chemistry, Nick was saying that, a lot of the diuretics, they're related to hypertension, and they just turn the kidneys on like that just to start excreting and start flushing. So there's no way that you can say to your body, I just want to pull the remaining fluid from underneath the skin and keep it all in the muscle bellies. A lot of them just turn the kidneys on, and it's just a switch, and that's it. And you're just dropping blood volume because you're pulling that water out of your blood volume.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, it's best to avoid. And if you do take diuretics, you need to have a good understanding about what they are eliminating, how they work. Do they eliminate sodium and potassium at the same time? Are they eliminating sodium and sparing potassium? These things are important. If something does go wrong, you or at the very least your coach better have a damn good understanding, because if you start cramping up or something like that, there have been a number of instances where bodybuilders have even died in the lead up to shows or post show due to diuretic use and crazy electrolyte imbalances. And if you don't have an understanding of what your diuretics are doing, then you're going to be in trouble, and you might not be able to reverse it if something does go wrong. So,
I saw saying in 2005, Scotty, my first IFBB show, I won't name anyone, but someone backstage had a bad turn from diuretics, and I think they took Lasix, maybe even injectable Lasix. Anyway, mate, it was scary backstage. Like, it was scary. It was like the scent of death was in the air. Like, honestly, it was really, really scary. They pulled through. And I've spoken to that person since, and they were like, yeah, I literally nearly died backstage. I saw it with my own eyes. It was terrible.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, I don't know if it was diuretic related, but I competed in a show where someone died on stage. I don't know if you remember. Yeah, literally in the Masters division, keeled over on stage, mid-pose. Shows off. Everybody leave the venue. I think it was surprisingly kept under wraps. I don't
think I heard that.
Yeah, it was a show down here in Victoria, and there were definitely diuretics within this competitor's bag. Like, they were trying to figure out what was going on, and I think that was determined to be the cause of death. So, yeah, tragic things can happen, and you don't want to mess around with drugs that you don't fully understand. Absolutely. All right, show day, Lee. We've made it. We've got our tan on. We've carved up successfully. The waist is tight. I tell all my competitors what you're going to do on show day mostly is wait. You're going to line up. You're going to wait for your top coat. Then you're going to lay around, and then you're going to wait backstage. And you're going to wait for the athletes meeting, which is going to be 20 minutes late. You're going to wait for the show to start. That's going to be half an hour late. And you're mostly just spending the day waiting. It is not an exciting time. And I try and pre-prepare my clients for the fact that they're not going to be doing much except laying around and waiting. How do you prep your clients for show day?
Yeah, it's almost like a bit of a letdown in some way, the show day. Like, it's very exciting and that, but the amount of waiting, it's a big contrast. You go from, the peaks of being backstage and being on the stage, and then you do long periods of waiting. I'd say the same thing. It's a very long day, and it seems to be made a little bit longer because you've got to fit in the spray tan on the day of the show. I have heaps of athletes that, are getting spray tanned at 5 or 5:30, and then the athletes meeting's not till 9 and they don't want to go home. So then they stay to the athletes meeting, and then, the show doesn't start for another hour or two after that, and then the divisions drag out. So look, I just say to them, it's going to be a long day, and pack at least 4 meals. And those meals, generally, it just goes back on the day of the show to what they have been doing for the majority of their diet. So exactly the same foods, pretty much the same quantities, same timing that you eat the foods. If you think that your division is about to come up and you're halfway through a meal, don't be worried about finishing. You don't have to finish the meal. You can just put it away and come back to it. So really just trying to manage expectations. There's going to be a lot of waiting. You're still going to have to think about your food while you're backstage. You're going to have to be listening out for the marshalling area. It's very disjointed. But it will be over in a flash. That's one thing I say to everyone when they're competing. This is going to be a memory before you know it. I know it's been a long prep and it's been feeling like a long time coming, but today is going to be over in a flash. Just enjoy it. And there's no real competition on the day of the show. So yes, you go up on stage, you got to pose, you got to present yourself, you got to go through all that. But if you're not, looking exactly how you want when you wake up the morning of the show, you're not going to be able to do anything during the day. So the bodybuilding show is one in the prep, in the lead up, and the day of the show is just like a celebration where you're just enjoying yourself. You get to pose in front of maybe friends and family, and it's just a good experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. I try and say the same thing to my athletes. Like, we're not going to pull a rabbit out of the hat on show day. You don't really have the ability to fill up that much on show day. You probably don't have the ability to even dry out that much on show day. So what you've got is generally what you've got, and the objective is to put you on that stage, feeling good, nice and comfortable, with a nice small waist. So we're not going to be pounding food backstage. I do remember seeing Logan Robson eat an entire pavlova backstage. I don't think his waist was as tight as it could have been that day, but still an impressive effort to get a last minute pump and some fullness in. You see all sorts of crazy things backstage. You'll see just a little bikini girl in the corner just like necking a bottle of honey, just like pounding it down. You're still like, might be a little bit too late.
What about the wine, the red wine?
The red wine. Well, that one might be all right actually. Settle the nerves a little bit.
I've seen vodka.
Yeah. Well, alcohol, a little vasodilator. I might not be against a shot of vodka to take away the nerves and get the vascularity going. But really, backstage it is just a case of pay attention to what's going on around you. Try and relax. Sure, put the feet up if you want. But really, it is just a case of waiting. And I do also encourage everyone to be present in the moment when they're about to walk on stage, be on stage, because it is very fleeting and it is very fast. Now, when it comes to the pump up can make a difference. And if you are, well hydrated and you do have a little bit of glycogen, you can get a little bit of a pump, which will enhance your look on stage. Quite often the pump up isn't as good. Like if you're, feeling particularly anxious or something like that, I find or if you're particularly cold, it can be difficult to get a pump. I don't think it's the end of the world if you're not getting a fantastic pump there. But as a general rule of thumb, it's probably a bit of a specific thing dependent on the individual and dependent on the division. For a lot of my female bikini clients, it's literally you're just pumping up your glutes, or it might be a case of you got to pump up your glutes and your delts. For some of them, I might be like, you're not allowed to pump up your delts; they're already too jacked. So you're only allowed to pump up your glutes. And for guys, I always say to my male bodybuilders, what body part do you look most impressive after you've pumped it up? And it's typically like chest and shoulders. So I'm generally focusing on chest and shoulders for male bodybuilders. But again, if they've got spectacular chest and shoulders and they've got a crappy back and arms, that might change. Do you have any specific pump-up protocols that you use?
Yeah, well, one thing just to make sure before the pump up, I always tell everyone, get your final coat finished first, because once you start pumping up, you're going to get tunnel vision. I'm going to want to pump up. You'll think of the tan as a secondary consideration. And often everyone rushes at the last second to get their final coat. So it can take a while backstage. So that's one of the things that I always tell people when they go backstage, get your tan sorted. ASAP is the number one priority. Then we start pumping up. And look, you hit the nail on the head. I think for most males, especially chest, shoulders, arms, that is more than enough. It's a combination of really high rep work where you're just going from maybe one exercise to another, maybe a front raise to a side raise to a rear raise to like a standing shoulder press. You're just moving around like that. And then taking breaks where you just pose. You pose in between, make sure that you're not sweating. That's a big consideration because that can ruin the tan. And just have cycles like that and aim to maybe pump up a little bit slower than what you might expect. Because you've got to think about it. If you're carved up, you haven't done any training for maybe the best part of a week. You have energy to burn. You're not going to flatten out. If you're doing it right, the opposite will probably happen. It'll look like you're getting fuller and fuller and fuller if you get it right. So that's an important consideration. You're not going to flatten out. So even if the division's running a bit behind time, just back it off a little bit. Just take it easy. You'll be able to get a good pump again. That's the whole point of the carb load. Like the carb load is there for you so that you can pump up backstage and look your best. That's the whole point of it. And so your body's been in this depleted state where it's been training without enough carbs, and I just try to get everyone to relax. The pump will work well. Get your tan sorted first, listen out for the marshal. And then when you're waiting in line, because there can often be a bit of downtime when they call out at a division and you've got to line up, keep posing in the line. You want to hold that pump. You're not going to flatten out. Really put the effort in backstage.
Yeah, I agree. It is somewhat dependent on the backstage marshalling and things as to when you should pump up and where you're pumping up. Some of the states, certainly within the IFBB, are a little bit more zealous about getting their competitors lined up backstage nice and early. Queensland likes to get them back there about an hour and a half before they go on stage for some reason. And we've got your Sydney show where they literally only have one stairwell to line up their competitors, so it's like one division's ready to go. So it is different, and I guess having someone to guide you and having a little bit of understanding of how the backstage area works can be beneficial, so you don't end up pumping up way too early. Because sometimes the backstage marshals will actually work against you. I've seen it happen where they've called people out, and it's like, man, you're not going to be on stage for at least an hour, and probably an hour 20 minutes. I don't know that you need to be pumping up right now, but.
And they're never that polite. They always seem to be screaming at you.
Yes. Apparently marshalling competitors is a difficult job, I've heard. Some maybe not that responsive. Although we did see an amazing upturn in compliance with the natural division this year in the IFBB, Luke. Everyone that worked backstage at a registration was like, man, these natties are so much easier to work with. I wonder why that is. They all seem to be friendly and listening and engaged. Interesting. So, it was, the pump up timing can be important. But like you said, if you've got if you're well loaded and you're well hydrated, you can pump up, you can rest a little, you can flatten out, you can cool down, you can pump up again, and it shouldn't be a big deal. So, again, just have a little bit of fun and a good time, and don't get too stressed out about it. Time to get on stage. Now, this is a very stressful time, I would imagine, for the first-time competitor. But like you said, the competition is done at this point, and all you can do is present yourself to your absolute best. When it comes to posing, if you make a little mistake or something, the chances are it's not as bad as what you envision it to be, and in many circumstances, probably no one even noticed. So it's just a case of getting back into the flow and getting back to business. Try and smile and have a good time. And outside of that, look, there is only so much you can do. In terms of quarter turn to the right, make sure you go to the right. But outside of that, Luke, any advice that you've got?
No, but that is the one big one that everyone will notice. Quarter turn to the right and you turn left, it's going to stand out, that's for sure. Look, this is where you want all your posing practice you've done during the prep to pay off, because your mind's going to be racing. You've got the bright lights on you, the deer lights. You don't know where to look. Your family's out there. Your brain is just everywhere else. And that's where you just want to be able to apply that muscle memory to the posing, where you can just go through the motions. It's a critical situation and you just want to fall back on your training without thinking about it. So that is where posing practice pays off, or it did for me in particular, because I found that, from a cognitive perspective, I was just thinking about every variable, everyone watching me. And so I just found a lot of comfort in being able to go through the muscle memory component of the posing. And if you're not the strongest poser, just so long as you're looking confident, so long as you don't have the shakes, as long as you're not looking overly awkward, you're not going to stand out. Don't sort of let the whole situation get to you too much, because it can be quite stressful up there. One thing I will say, don't let anyone stand in front of you, especially when it's, some of those front and rear double bicep shots with the men. And you always have someone who's polite that, sort of stands back and lets two other people stand in front of them, and then you can't see them posing. Get to the front, fight your way, because chances are the judges are going to see it and they're going to be like, guys, just move apart. But if you're standing behind, it can really ruin a few of those poses, especially if you've got a couple of aggressive bodybuilders in front of you who are trying to push their way in front of you. Just make sure you hold your ground, and hopefully the judges will see it and they'll create a bit more space on stage for you.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been warned to stand back on the line, Luke, but I've never been left back there while other people were in front of me. I agree completely. I even see the bikini girls do it now with the walk to the back of the stage, walk to the back line. Generally, the most experienced, the best ones will stop just short of that back line, and they'll let everyone walk half a step in front of them. And as a result, their glutes just appear to be a little bit bigger, and they just seem to stand out against the background even more. So it happens in every division, and it's just a little bit of gamesmanship on the day. It's the judge's job to pull you in line if you're a little bit out of it. So yeah, I say push the boundaries. It was even to the point where they swapped competitors around. Competitor 87 and number 89, please swap positions. I made sure I always walked in front. Like I always walked on the judge's side so that they would see me for no reason other than just I wanted to be the star of the day. So yeah, there is little things that you can do. I don't know. I used to have fun on stage. It was a good time. I remember competing against Logan Robson. I think I might have even been a two-man call-out. And I talked him through every single pose. I was an idiot on stage. It would be like front double bicep. This one's mine, Logan. I got this one. And then it would be, this one's close, legs. This one's close. Side chest. No, I got this, buddy. I'm owning you. Look at my hamstring. And then just ran through it. And I don't know why I was doing it, but after the show, he was like, "You're a fucking idiot." And I was like, "Yeah, sorry. I'm really sorry about that." I don't know what was going through my mind.
It is. And we always see at least once per show. I don't know why, but you always see maybe in the pose off, you got a couple of competitors going for it. And then they turn to each other and they do a most muscular face-to-face. And I'm like, turn to the crowd so we can see it. Nobody can see you facing each other. What are you doing that for? It's always, every show.
Yeah, I remember Josh Lenardowitz sucked me into that move. And I quickly realised that he was the last person I should be doing the most muscular next to. So I quickly spun into a vacuum pose because I was just like, he's going to kill me in that shot. I don't need any of this. The main thing is know your number and listen for your number. There's nothing worse than being that competitor when they're repeatedly calling your number and you're just standing there like a deer in headlights, wondering what's going on. So yeah, know your number, listen to the head judge, and just fall back on your posing practice, because if you only ever quarter turn to the right in practice, if you're nervous, the chances are you will quarter turn to the right when you're stressed. So yeah,
definitely.
Post show, assuming it was your last competition, obviously you just go out and eat until you vomit. I would assume, Luke, that'd be your recommendation.
Yeah, look, it's going to be hard to really fight that. I think for the first 48 hours, it's going to be game on. I mean, you can try, you can go for it, and some people do, but they don't have much success. It's kind of like, the promise you make to yourself that you're going to eat all the protein bars that you've bought throughout the prep. It doesn't happen once the show's over. They sit in the back, they're in the garage, you're going to throw them in the bin. Same deal when it comes to your nutrition. Look, you want to have some control, but I encourage in the strongest terms someone to go out for, 24 hours, and it doesn't have to be a binge session, but just enjoy the time, maybe with your loved ones, family that's come to see you at the show. Just enjoy yourself. I remember I used to be concerned about the post-show period because I'd try to line up some photo shoots after the show, and I remember some advice Tony Freeman gave me. And he said, listen, you want to go out for 48 hours, 72 hours, eat up. He said, you'll lose some of that separation in your glutes. He said, but you're going to be covering them anyway, probably with like bike pants or something like that. He said, the fullness that you get while you're out on after a show, after you've eaten, he goes, you can't match it. They're some of the best photo shoots. And he said, save your really lean, hard photo shoot for the week before the show, and then make the post-show the really full, pumped one in the gym. And I took his advice and I did a great photo shoot with Tony and Ivan Sadik back in 2013. It worked amazingly well. It really did. So anyway, long story short, enjoy food for a period. Maybe enjoy the company of your friends and family that have come to see you, and sort of just put it on the back burner for a few days. That is my advice.
Yeah, look, I agree. It's funny how I know some coaches put a lot of pressure on their athletes post-show to nail the reverse. I personally have never nailed a reverse diet. Some have been better than others. I would say the vast majority of people do not nail their reverse, and those that do are generally maybe not the happiest of individuals I know, and perhaps have some, eating disorder sort of issues that allows them to desperately stay in control of their food. The goal post-show is to restore your health. Like, it's not to maintain comp condition. Maintaining comp condition is incredibly unhealthy, unrealistic, and it prevents you from achieving your goals as a bodybuilder to get better and build more tissue. You need to get healthy. You need to get energy back. You want to restore normal hunger and satiety cues. You want to restore normal hormonal function. And all of these things are dependent on you putting on body fat. And my messaging is very, very different now than what it was previously. In the past, I was trying to prevent people from blowing out, and that would be the priority of the messaging. Now, the priority of my messaging is to let my clients know your goal is to put on body fat. And it can be quite a dramatic shift in mentality. You've been focused and just working so incredibly hard to losing all this body fat. But I think it's really important that a coach emphasizes that putting on body fat is not a bad thing. In fact, it's going to liberate you from all of the negative health consequences that come from a bodybuilding prep, and it's going to allow you to get in a position to improve your physique faster. So I think those that put pressure on their athletes to stay super, super lean probably just exacerbate the sensations of guilt and angst that post-show eating creates. So that's a big change for me. I even say to my clients that I want them to be, 10% over their stage weight, probably within 3 to 5 weeks. So if you're an 80 kilo male bodybuilder, 3 to 5 weeks post-show, I want you about 88 kilos. If you're a 50 kilo bikini competitor, I want you to be 55 kilos. Because it's normally around that 10% over stage weight that things start to normalize. Hunger starts to go under control. You can actually register the sensation of fullness, and you actually start to feel like a normal functioning human being again. And while you will probably come out of the show with a slightly distorted perception of what lean is, now that you've seen yourself at your absolute shredded best, to any other member of society, 10% over stage condition, assuming you're in great condition, is still a very lean, very impressive physique.
It is. And you hit the nail on the head, Scotty. Like, the whole contest prep, I guess all you're focusing on is that energy balance, calories in versus calories out. I want to be in a deficit. I want to drop the body fat. But then post-show, you need to think about your energy availability. So that's how much energy do I have left over after I've trained? And whatever that amount is, I need for all of the physiological processes in my body. And during the contest prep, you're running low energy availability targets. That's why you feel like shit. You can't think, your emotions are all over the place, you're tired, you're fatigued, you're not sleeping, your training performance comes down. So you want to get back to close to optimal energy availability ASAP so you can prioritize, number one, your overall athletic performance, because you're not going to grow doing suboptimal training. So that's one of the main considerations. But also you want to rebalance your body's physiology. You want to get everything back. Hormones, bone mineral density can even be affected, sleep, cognitive function. You want to get back to that optimal athlete zone. A bodybuilding prep serves a purpose to get up on stage and look ridiculous in terms of your condition, but bodybuilding preps and maximum athletic performance certainly don't go hand in hand due to the restrictive nature of what you're doing.
No, absolutely agree. And I think that for a lot of people post-show, they might try and do something like train away or cardio away excessive eating. Like if they know they overate the night before, they might be like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to smash out 45 minutes of stairs, or, train really, really hard and, compensate for it. I certainly got caught in that trap a number of times. But all that does is just leave you in that perpetually overtrained, energy drained, stressed out state. It'll probably just amplify your hunger and make it more likely that you're going to overeat again that night. So I think it's very, very important to understand that the post-show is a recovery phase. You aren't really in a position to build muscle. Like a lot of people will say, you're going to rebound post-show and build all this muscle. And I'll even have some people say, I got a DEXA scan. I've put on 3 kilos of muscle in the 3 weeks post-show. You've put on 3 kilos of muscle glycogen, perhaps, and that is registering as lean muscle. But it is very, very silly for your body to be building muscle tissue immediately post-show. When muscle is metabolically active, it requires energy at rest. It's pretty unlikely after your body goes through an experience where it's almost sort of thinks it's starved to death, to suddenly add metabolically active tissue. So you will fill up, you will most likely look bigger than ever before, and it's quite a fun time. But the reality is, until you've recovered, until your body's sort of no longer in a state of distress, you're probably not going to be able to build much tissue. So post-show is for recovery. I generally have my athletes train, but they don't need to. But again, I think athletes with idle time on their hands post-show is sometimes dangerous. So I do like to get them to get a little bit of a pump on, make sure they're not training super hard. My general recommendations are train intuitively. If you feel fantastic and you really want to get in there, then okay, go train lower body. Don't take anything to failure, but do a half decent session. And if you're tired but super motivated, now maybe you get a little arm pump. And if you're exhausted, don't train. Like, let your body recover. I think it's very important that you scale back the activity significantly post-show. In fact, the training can probably look something like the peak week leading into the show.
Yeah, and one thing as well, Scotty, when it comes to the targets and putting them up, I don't know if you found this, but I've certainly found if we're increasing someone's calorie intake by a large margin, maybe 1,000, maybe even 1,500 calories a day, they're very inclined to want to do that because they've been restricted and they're very used to the foods that they're eating. So what I found is they are inclined to fill up more on the foods that they were already eating, and that has a tendency to maybe minimize some of the off-plan snacking and the big binge eating because they have an extra calorie allowance. They've been waiting for it all prepped. Beautiful. I'm eating more of this food that makes me feel very satisfied, a lot of whole foods. And I have found that does help with some of those massive binge eating sessions because you're not restricting. So, it's not that same mindset. It's like, oh yeah, if I want to go out and have this meal, I will. It's not a problem, but I'm not going to sort of do the old trick I used to do and $50 at McDonald's every day post show, mate. There's no need for it because they're quite satisfied from the larger volume of food, and they're also happy to eat those foods because they're used to it. They want to hold on to some condition and that, they don't want to completely change the diet. And I found that does help to minimize the calories going too crazy.
I agree, and if there is a vague recommendation, I normally put people's calories up by about 50% post-show. So if you're a bikini girl and you finished your diet on 1,200 calories, you're probably going up to 1,800. If you're a male classic physique guy, you finished on 2,800 calories, I'm probably putting you to about 4,200. And it's for that exact same reason. I want them to be satisfied so that they don't feel the need to excessively binge. And those that generally try and restrict, those that generally go off plan more. So I think a more sustainable, realistic approach post-show is better, not just for the athlete's physical well-being, but for their mental well-being as well, because they'll get closer to hitting their targets if their targets are realistic. If you've got someone coming out of a show, they're ravenous hungry, and you put their calories up by 200 calories, they're still ravenous hungry, and now they don't have the incentive of staying on track because of that looming comp date. It's just inevitable that they're going to blow out. So, yeah, I think it's important to be realistic and understand that, again, the goal is to put on body fat. So don't beat yourself up about it. If things go a little bit awry and you put on a little bit more body fat, well, guess what? That's probably just you're a step closer to your full recovery and a step closer to building more muscle.
The three most entertaining lines, Scotty, for someone who's in the sort of final week of their prep where they've just competed. I'm going to keep my cardio up. I'm going to reverse diet, and I'm going to eat all those protein bars I bought. None of it ever happens. None of it ever happens.
No. And maybe for the sake of their duo track, not eating those protein bars isn't the worst idea. It can be an interesting time when you introduce all these new foods that you haven't experienced for a while. The partner might be sleeping in the other room just due to some gas-related incidents in my experience. Hopefully there's plenty of information in there for our listeners. Look, there's a whole lot of other things I guess we could unpack, like in terms of the psychological ramifications post-show. Not unusual for athletes to get a little bit lost. I mean, sometimes it can be a bit of a grieving process when you've forgotten this enormous goal and you've just achieved it and now it's gone. So there can be some issues there. So I always encourage people to have other goals post-show. Focus on career, focus on relationships, go see friends and family. All this stuff is super important and can maybe go some way to fill the gap that the no longer prepping for a competition has left you with. Look, it's a very interesting time, and for those that haven't experienced it, post-show, It's a very interesting time, Luke. It's a very interesting time for most.
It is. It is. It definitely is. Have some plans. Go for a holiday. Don't forget you got a family. Put your head back in work. Just have some plans. Do something outside of bodybuilding.
Yeah, I think that's the best possible advice. All right, to all of those that have tuned in, we greatly appreciate it, and would love for you to like and subscribe so you can get notifications when the next episode is uploaded. From myself and Luke, we thank you, and from Max's Muscle TV, hope you enjoyed, and we will see you for our next episode.
There's no cure for this!